So you probably saw the thumbnail of today's video and thought, wow, that's extremely creepy. I mean, yeah, imagine walking through a graveyard and seeing a gravestone with a window in it. Would you look inside? Would you run away? Would you stand there in shock? Today we're going to be talking about some really weird and creepy things that people have seen in cemeteries and graveyards, and we're also going to be talking about some very eerie gravestones. Now, I just want to firstly say we're not going to be making fun of any of these gravestones just because people were buried there and we have to be respectful still. Most of the ones we're going to talk about are hundreds and hundreds of years old. Okay, so let's start with the grave that this whole video is about. This is the mysterious final resting place of Dr. Timothy Clark Smith. So the question that most people ask is, why is there a window on his grave? Here's the creepy reason. Back in the 18th and 19th century, people were often mistakenly buried alive. They didn't have the proper tests back then to really determine if someone was dead. So if someone looked dead, if they weren't responding, if it didn't look like they were breathing, a lot of the times they were buried, and sometimes that person would wake up underground and they were buried. This spontaneous act of waking up after you've been buried is called the Lazarus syndrome. It is described as the spontaneous return of circulation after failed attempts at resuscitation. What is even creepier is that there have been coffins taken out of the ground hundreds of years later and there's scratch marks inside of them. So people really did have a strong fear. They did not want this to happen to them. So Timothy Clark Smith decided to design his own grave that had a window in it just in case he woke up and had to like call for help, or if someone looked in and saw him struggling. It was more for safety reasons. It's still there to this day and people often go up with flashlights and look through the window. What's kind of eerie is that this doctor actually died on Halloween. He was put into the grave that he designed for himself, and as far as people know, he never woke up. His grave can be found at Evergreen Cemetery in New Haven, and it looks just like it did hundreds of years ago. The only thing is that if you look at the window, it's kind of foggy, there's mold growing around the edges. The window doesn't look as clear as it used to. What's creepy is that many visitors of this graveyard often claim to see a green light glowing from the window of his grave. But yeah, it's still there. People still go and visit it. So let me know down below if you would actually go visit and look through that window. As brave as I am when it comes to paranormal stuff and creepy stuff like that, I don't know if I could. The next really creepy thing we're gonna talk about is called a mort safe. In the Victorian age, people were putting cages over burial plots. People were really confused as to why these were made. They thought maybe it was in case the dead rose again and tried to like walk around as zombies. The cages would like keep them contained and wouldn't let them walk around. But that's not actually the reason. A mort safe is an iron coffin or framework which protected a grave to prevent the body from being dug up and taken away for medical research. So it was actually to protect the body and not to protect the people from zombies. The next grave we're gonna talk about is the one of Inez Clark. This is actually a really sad story. She lived from 1873 to 1880. Her grave is currently in Chicago, USA, and it says, Inez Clark was a 6-year-old girl struck and killed by a bolt of lightning in 1880. I mean, what a sudden way to go. Imagine you're just walking outside and lightning strikes you. On top of her grave is a life-size sculpture of Inez, seated on a bench, wearing a lace dress and holding a parasol and a flower. The artwork was commissioned by her parents and it was put in this glass box to protect it, because often people like to touch statues, which does ruin them after a while, and also just to protect it from weather and stuff. Now, the reason why I'm bringing up her grave is because there's a lot of paranormal activity that surrounds it. Usually Usually if a parent takes their kid to visit this cemetery, it says kids will often tell their parents they've been playing with a young girl dressed in old-fashioned clothes, and they'll always say it when they're really close to her grave. I don't even find anything super creepy about that. I feel like it's more sad. I feel really bad for her story. But I guess you would get a slight eerie feeling if your kid told you that. The next grave is called Head in Hands. This is a striking bronze gravestone in the world-famous Père Lachaise cemetery. The sculpture is of an actor and musician, Fernand Arbelot, who died in 1942. Little is known about this man, but it is said that he is holding the face of his wife. It says that he wished to gaze upon her for all eternity. I mean, it's kind of like romantic and stuff, but also like he's only holding her head. There's also a little description on his grave that said they were amazed at the beautiful journey which led them to the end of life. So it's kind of sweet. They obviously were really in love. I just think the sculpture is a little bit unnerving, but it also does have a lot of amazing meaning. This next one really bothers me. It is a grave that says specimens. So there are a bunch of these gravestones in the Ohio Asylum for the Insane. And rather than showing a name or a date, they only say specimens. So no one really knows if it's like people that were experimented on. Could it be like body parts? No one's really sure, but it's definitely a very disturbing thing to see, especially because that asylum had a really bad reputation back in the day. They didn't treat their patients well at all and did a lot of experiments. I know the college I went to actually used to be an insane asylum. I did a whole video on that, I think like 3 years ago. But there were unmarked graves around the college campus that they couldn't move. And the people they buried there only had numbers. They didn't have names, which is so sad. This next one is called the Baby Monster Grave. This is a very mysterious gravestone, and people aren't sure if maybe the last name of this baby was Monster or the first name. Most people think it's probably the description of the baby, which is terrible. It does say that during the time this baby was alive, the word monster describes somebody with a severe deformity. So this baby could have been deformed in some way and was called a monster, which is so sad. It reminds me of Hunchback of Notre Dame. Like, we're all people here, guys. We all deserve love still. What's even more sad though is that this baby was never given a name. It was alive for 5 months, which is a while before giving her baby a name. So it was just buried under Baby Monster. How horrible. Anyways though guys, those are all of the really intense and eerie graves that I could find online. Like I said before, all these graves do belong to people, so there's no disrespect from me whatsoever. It's just a part of our history and things that people see every day and talk about. And in today's video, we're going to be talking about the creepiest and weirdest grave sites and tombstones around the world. And as you can tell by the title of today's video, we're going to be talking about a specific grave site that has stairs down to the grave, and you'll find out why. Alright, so without further ado, let's get right into today's video. The first thing we're going to be talking about is gravestones that only have the word specimen written on it. Now, I have briefly mentioned this in a video before, but I feel like I really need to expand. There are many gravestones in the Ohio Asylum for the Insane, but 2 stand out as a little more disturbing than the rest. Rather than containing a date or a name, it simply says specimens. So people weren't sure if that was like a last name. Was it people they experimented on with untested medication? Was it just body parts? I mean, there are so many theories that people have about this. And I mean, especially considering the horrible reputation of this insane asylum. The asylum was best known for its practice of lobotomy, but it was also known to have practiced hydrotherapy, electroshock, restraint, psychotropic drugs, many of which have been found to be harmful today. And it was really bizarre, the people that they were enlisting. Like, people that weren't even insane, they were putting them in this place. Like, here are some of the reasons you could be put in an insane asylum back then. Epilepsy, menopause, alcohol addiction, tuberculosis. Like, none of those really have anything anything to do with being insane. The burials began soon after the institution's opening, as there were deceased patients who were unclaimed by their families. And until 1943, a lot of the graves just had numbers, which is awful. The cemetery is also said to be haunted by shadowy people with strange lights. In one area, the grave's linear shapes form a circle, which is said to be a witch's meeting point. So this whole area just has really bad and like sad vibes. Next, we have the grave of Florence Irene Ford, and this is the grave that has the stairs. When Florence Irene died at the age of 10, her mother had a very strange request. She asked that her daughter's coffin be fitted with a small window with stairs leading down to the casket. Now, Florence was born on September 3rd of 1861, and apparently during her very short life, she was very afraid of thunderstorms. As soon as one rolled in, she'd run to her mother Ellen, who would patiently comfort her until the storm passed. And then in 1871, at the age of 10, Florence died of what was called yellow fever. And her mother, who was obviously very, very distraught, couldn't bear the thought of Florence being buried alone. She still wanted to comfort her during thunderstorms, even as she laid to rest. So Ellen had a small window fitted at the head of her daughter's casket and a narrow stairway built 6 feet down to the level of the window. Ellen had hinged metal trapdoors installed at the top of the stairs so she could shut them during storms, protecting her from the wind and rain as she sat by her daughter's coffin, reading or singing to her until the storm passed. So this mother would literally, whenever there was a storm, would go to her daughter's grave, sit by the window in the staircase, and would read her a book, would sing, would talk to her, would comfort her. I mean, it's really heartbreaking. The grave has changed very little since 1871, and on the gravestone it says, "As bright and affectionate a daughter as ever, God with his image blessed." And behind the gravestone lies the metal trapdoors, which can still be opened today, so cemetery visitors can still comfort Florence during storms. So because her mother has passed, people will still go and do this in place of her mother. So yeah, really heartbreaking, but also like I'm really intrigued by it. I've never heard of this in my life. Next, we have the tomb of Rufus E. Case. Mr. Case requested to be buried in his rocking chair and situated facing his home state of Louisiana. He was literally buried in a sitting position, which is something you never really hear. He is actually positioned next to his daughter's grave, but above ground in his rocking chair with his tomb around him. So he wasn't buried in a coffin, he was buried sitting in his rocking chair. Wow. Then we have what's called the Turning Angel statue. On March 14th of 1908, a gas explosion in the basement of the Natchez Drug Company killed 5 young female employees. The youngest was only 12 years old. It caused the whole brick structure to collapse, and apparently the victims' tombstones are only marked with their last names. Their former employer was so distraught by the explosion that he paid for the women's burial spots and commissioned the stone angel to stand over their modest graves. The angel has since attracted a fair bit of attention to the historic Mississippi cemetery. It's now known as the Turning Angel statue because according to people, it will literally turn its head to look at the cars that are passing by, and this effect is said to be most notable at night, which is definitely pretty creepy. Like all of the car's headlights will pass by the angel and see her light up in the dark, and her head will literally be turned to them, and it's not supposed to be. So yeah, once again, sad but pretty spooky stuff. And then lastly, we have a tombstone that says baby monster, and this is a tombstone where people don't think this baby might have been human. This mysterious gravestone could have something to do with the monster being the last name rather than a descriptor, but during this time the word monster describes someone or something with a severe deformity. So people also think that maybe this poor baby was deformed in some way and people were afraid of it, which is horrible. And even more disturbing is that this poor baby was never given a name. It literally just says baby monster. This was just a 5-month-old child, and it's really sad to see this. I mean, anytime I see any gravestone that doesn't have a name and just has like a number or like a saying like baby monster, it really upsets me. It's really sad that historically this was okay. Anyways though guys, those are all of the eerie but also sad gravestones and tombstones around the world that really baffle people and really attract a lot of attention. If there are any that I missed that are really interesting, definitely comment them down below. I could also make this into a series because there are so many, so give this video a thumbs up if you want me to continue talking about this. My shirt has thumb holes. I don't know why. I've never really understood these. They're just feeling very uncomfortable. All right, so today we're gonna be talking about something that absolutely fascinates me. It is a thing called dollhouse graves. This is literally what they used to do back in the day when a child passed away. I mean, to be honest, a lot of these stories are very tragic and sad and horrible, and I do think the idea of this is really, really sweet. All right, so let's get into today's video about dollhouse graves. So like I said, these dollhouses were built by grieving parents for their beloved daughters, filled with different toys that they like. The whole thing is just so tragic, and what's sad is that these were built such a long time ago, and over the years they've been vandalized and destroyed, but some are still around to this day, and those are the ones that we're going to be talking about. The first dollhouse grave is of Dorothy Marie Harvey, and she lived from 1926 to 1931. She died at the age of 5, and she was buried with a dollhouse over her grave, which was a common thing for people to do in the late 1800s and early 1900s. According to the story that is most often told about her, Dorothy was apparently on her way up north with her parents, passing through rural West Tennessee, when she came down with the measles and unfortunately passed away really quickly. Local townspeople felt badly for the family and paid for a dollhouse to cover Dorothy's grave. And when the family passed away, the cemetery has still maintained her gravesite, which I think is awesome. Toys and flowers are left by her gravesite to this very day, and legend has it that you can sometimes see Dorothy when you look in the windows of the dollhouse. The next dollhouse grave is of Vivian May Allison, and she lived from 1894 to 1899. She lived in Indiana and died at the age of 6, which broke the hearts of her parents. At the time, her father had actually been building a dollhouse for her as a Christmas present, but his daughter passed away before receiving it. So instead, in his grief, he decided to place it over her grave, adding toys and trinkets his daughter loved in life. And for nearly 70 years, her parents would come and maintain her grave and made sure it still looked great. And after all of her family members passed away and no one was able to look after her grave, it fell into disrepair. It was vandalized and literally ripped away from the gravesite. Like honestly, like it makes me so mad that people have no respect for stuff like that. But several volunteers in the area decided to create a new one for her and fix it up, so now it's back in place. The next dollhouse grave is of Lova Klein, and she lived from 1902 to 1908. Now, she was actually born with this mysterious crippling illness in 1902, and her sole pleasure in her brief life was to gaze into dollhouses with large windows, most of them built by her father and filled with dolls by her mother. So during her very short life, she absolutely loved dollhouses. When Lova died in 1908 at the age of 6, her father had the dollhouse moved to her grave so that she can always see it even in death. Now, both of her parents died in the mid-1940s and were for some reason buried in a different cemetery from where Lova was buried, and Lova's father had asked that her dollhouse be destroyed after her mother's death, which I just find really, really odd. But the community actually didn't want to destroy this dollhouse. They thought it was too sweet and too precious, so they actually dug up Lova's body and took her and the dollhouse to her parents' grave so that they could all be together and the dollhouse wouldn't have to be destroyed. I think that was such an awesome idea. The locals also kept repairing and refurnishing the dollhouse whenever it was broken into by ghoulish people. Now, this grave area is said to be haunted by her spirit, and actually a glow has been seen within the dollhouse windows after dark, and there's no lights like in the dollhouse or around the grave. Orbs have also been spotted nearby, and the tiny furniture within the dollhouse is said to move around all the time. And it's unclear if Lova's spirit is just really happy that she was moved beside her parents or if she was unhappy that she was moved. The next dollhouse grave is of Nadine Earls, and she lived from 1929 to 1933, so she was really, really young. She wasn't even 5 years old yet when she passed away. It was December, and all she wanted for Christmas was a dollhouse, a wish her father was busy working to fulfill for her. So this is the second child who passed away while their father was building them a dollhouse. It's so sad. At the Oakwood Cemetery in Lynette, Alabama, that dollhouse dollhouse, which is now made of brick to ensure its longevity, stands among the gravestones. The small brick bungalow has all the makings of a real house with a front porch, striped awnings, a mailbox, flower boxes in the summer, and an evergreen wreath and Christmas lights in the winter. After this dollhouse grave was installed, her parents filled it with a bunch of toys, a baby buggy, all kinds of little dolls, and they always kept it super tidy for Nadine. And what appears to be that bed in the middle of the dollhouse is actually her grave, and this is what it says on her grave. It says, "Our darling little girl, sweetest in the world, little Nadine Earls. Me wanted now," which I guess is something that she used to say a lot. Years after her death, her family kind of kept her gravesite clean and tidy and would add toys, but eventually her family passed away and they were actually buried in the same cemetery as her, which is great. And now the city has actually upkept the dollhouse. And lastly, we have the Keating children. One of the oldest dollhouse markers indicates the grave of not only one but 3 babies from the same family who all coincidentally died on the 2nd day of the month. Built in New St. Joseph Cemetery in Cincinnati, Ohio by John Keating. This 2-story dollhouse was built in remembrance of his daughter Mary Julia, his son Eddie, and niece Mary Agnes Keating. Now this dollhouse is very intricately carved. It has roof shingles and decorative stones all over it. Like if you go up close to it, you can see all the detail that was really put into it. But unfortunately, nowadays the dollhouse sort of fell into disrepair because no one was looking after it anymore. But at one point in time, carved furniture was actually inside of this dollhouse. Like carved tiny little furniture pieces. Now on this dollhouse, it says, "To our little darlings," and it bears the children's names. On the description it says, "One by one our leaves are falling, fading day by day, and in silence heaven is calling, one by one our lambs away." Oh, it's so sad. I honestly always get so sad talking about like old gravestones and like cemeteries and stuff like that, because honestly, like a lot of this has a lot of tragic stories behind it. So today I'm spiky. I am super spiky. This shirt is really cool to me, but the thing is, it's so uncomfortable. And my dog is barking upstairs. I love how my dad chooses this time to rile the dogs up while I'm filming. But yeah, just, you might not want to hug me while I'm wearing this. I tried hugging my mom and she's like, "Whoa. Don't kill me." There is a lot of noise going on upstairs in my house, so if you hear it, it's not ghosts, it's just my dogs and my dad walking around. Actually, I'm gonna go inform them that I'm making a video because they're being very rude right now. Okay, so today I thought it would be pretty interesting to explore haunted graveyards on Google Maps, and not just any haunted graveyards. We are gonna be looking at the most haunted graveyards in the entire world, and the reason why we are looking at these on Google Maps Street View is because a lot of these places are very far from me, so I actually can't go and explore them, so we're gonna have to use the handy dandy computer to explore them. But honestly, it's still exciting because Google Street View really allows you to sort of look around and walk down pathways and streets, so it's still creepy. It's like being there, but not exactly. I know I did a video quite a while ago about the creepiest things found on Google Maps, and I actually used Street View to kind of look at them, and you guys loved that video, so hopefully this one's cool as well. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna briefly talk about each location, and then I will kind of go and explore it so you guys can really see what it looks like there. So be prepared to be scared. Did that rhyme? That rhymed. So the first one we are gonna be looking at is Rookwood Cemetery. I hope I'm saying all of these names correctly, but this one is pretty old. In 1868, this cemetery was started, and it is located in Sydney, Australia. And what's super interesting is it wasn't always called Rookwood Cemetery. It was actually originally called Necropolis, which means City of the Dead. Why would they call a cemetery City of the Dead? Like, that's just scary. But then in 1879, the villagers voted to kind of change the name, and now it is Rookwood. So this place is 877 acres in size, which I believe makes it the largest cemetery in the Southern Hemisphere. 1 million people have their resting place here. 1 million. And obviously, because there are so many people that were buried here, a lot of people that have come to visit these graves have seen ghostly figures. So that is why it has been put in the top, like I think 10 most paranormal cemeteries in the world. I couldn't find any specific paranormal stories about this area, so we're just gonna go and look at it right now. Honestly, I'm kind of scared. I don't know if I want to do this. If you guys see anything weird, like ghostly figures or just something strange, definitely comment down below. I feel like you guys always find something like like just always. So I think I'm just gonna kind of put a full screen view up here for you of me looking through this area, and I might add some creepy music. Should I add some creepy music? I'm gonna add some creepy music. I know some people hate when I do that, but honestly it just makes it more like mysterious and eerie, and it kind of puts you in the mood. Alrighty, so that was definitely a bit of a creepy start. At least the sky was nice and blue and there was clouds in the air. Like it wasn't the worst thing in the world, but still, I mean, it would still be eerie to visit, I think. The next one we have here is South Brisbane Cemetery, and this one is also located in Australia. So Australia, you guys have some creepy cemeteries. Honestly though, like I'm jealous. Like why can't they be near me? So this one is in Dutton Park, Queensland, Australia. It is 27 acres and the first burial took place in 1870. So this one is also really old. I feel like the older the cemetery is, the more paranormal stuff happens there. And this one has approximately 19,500 people buried there. So I mean, it's not a million like the other one. Like holy goodness, a million. But I mean 19,500 is still a lot of people. And there actually is a paranormal story about this place that someone wrote. So I'm just gonna read a bit of what they said because it is pretty creepy. It says, one Sunday afternoon, I went to Dutton Park Cemetery with a friend. As usual, the cemetery was deserted. This one grave caught my attention from the early 1900s. It had a tall, rounded headstone with a rusted steel fence surrounding it and a small gate, which was slightly open. And they go on to say how while they were standing in front of this grave, they started noticing that someone else was there standing beside them. It says, in my mind, I could see an outline of a person standing there. And because that gate in front of the headstone was slightly open, this person decides to slowly shut it, and immediately they heard a stern male voice growl, "Don't touch the gate." And this voice came from the grave. I guess it was more like, "Don't touch the gate." In my mind's eye, I could see an old man huffing and puffing and shaking his head at my impertinence in touching the gate a second time. So obviously, this ghost of an old man was not happy that this person touched their grave, and I hear that a lot. Like when you go to cemeteries, don't mess with anything. It's just not a good idea. Ghosts don't like it when you touch their stuff. Don't touch their stuff. And there's a lot of other stories about when people go on a graveyard tour here and their cameras constantly act up. Like sometimes it won't let them take a picture, or sometimes the flash on their camera will just start going on and off. When the camera acts up, apparently like someone is close to you. There is a dead person close to you. Someone said that whenever this happens, I know the spirits of the restless dead are sending me a message to stay away. So I guess a lot of the ghosts in this particular cemetery are not very happy. So with that being said, let's take a look. So unfortunately with that one, we couldn't actually look in the cemetery itself, but we could still see quite a lot from the outside. And honestly, I think the creepiest part about that was the huge, like, creepy trees. And I love trees. They look really cool, but they almost looked like that tree from, what's that movie? The Headless Horseman? Sleepy Hollow. You know that really creepy tree? Like, those trees surrounding the cemetery looked like that tree. So the next one we're gonna look at is St. Louis Cemetery, and this one is in New Orleans, Louisiana. And I find this one really interesting because most of the graves are above ground in vaults, and they were constructed in the 18th and 19th centuries. Apparently it was opened in 1789. So this is gonna be the oldest one that we've looked at so far, and I have never seen anything like this. So prepare yourself. But before I show you, I actually did find quite a lot of information about the ghosts here. It says that a lot of the time these spirits appear in solid human-like form and can actually talk to the people walking through the cemetery, which I found really, really creepy. It says they are sometimes mistaken for being real people. And it also says that 2 of the entities were restless and upset because they were buried in nameless graves. And so I'm going to talk about these 2 people that were buried without their name on the gravestone, which is actually, it's pretty sad. Like, I understand why they're so upset. The first one is the entity of Mary Laveau. I hope I'm saying her name right. Sorry, Mary. It says her apparition has been seen in the area of her unmarked tomb. She usually looks very frustrated, storming along the pathway. She's in a foul mood. She's chanting curses and she's yelling at the living. It says that she once slapped a man who was passing by her grave, and this could have been perhaps because he stepped on her grave unknowingly. Maybe he looked like someone she hated when she was still alive. There's all kinds of reasons behind this. And the second ghost with the unmarked grave, his name was Henry Vines. I really hope I'm saying that okay. Don't come to get me, ghosts. And it says that he appears in full solid form, looking very much alive. He is described as tall, dressed in a white shirt, piercing blue eyes, and he's looking for his family's lost vault. Apparently, people have described this guy as coming up to them and asking if they can help him find his family's lost vault. And then no matter what your answer is, he walks away and suddenly disappears. Sometimes he will ask people this by tapping them on the shoulder, and he will also appear at funerals asking family if there are any room in their vault for his remains. So I don't know, this guy seems pretty restless, but I thought that was kind of interesting information to have before we take a look at it. So here we go. This is really eerie, but also really cool to look at. So yeah, that was pretty interesting, right? You know what this looks like though? It looks like they filmed some of the scenes from the originals in this area. Could that be true? Like, for some reason that just came to my mind. Am I crazy? Like, I feel like they filmed some of the show there. So the next one we're going to look at is Stull Cemetery, and this cemetery is also called the Gateway to Hell, which is super creepy. So this town was founded in the 1800s, and they soon after built this cemetery, and tons of people say that the Gateway to Hell opens on Halloween at midnight in this cemetery. And let me just read this off. It says, on the appointed hour, a hidden secret staircase becomes unsealed. The stairs appear to lead down into a grave, but they're actually a direct passage to the underworld. So that's really weird. And I also read a lot of other stories about how this cemetery has been linked to countless legends involving witchcraft, satanic cults, like all kinds of really evil things have happened in this cemetery according to stories and legends. And it's weird because even the local police tell people not to enter the cemetery on Halloween, so it's almost like they're afraid as well. There have also been a lot of really things that I don't want to bring up on this channel because of my younger viewers, but a lot of bad stuff has happened in the cemetery. Let me just say that. I even even think that people aren't allowed to go there anymore. I think it's sealed off. I think you have to pay a fine if you walk through this cemetery. And what's also sort of cool is I think an episode of Supernatural was filmed here. I don't know if they actually went to the actual location or if they kind of made their set look like Skull Cemetery. I don't know, but I do remember that episode. So, let's take a look at it. So the next one we're going to take a look at, a lot of you, probably most of you have heard of before. They are the Paris catacombs. And whenever I hear about the catacombs, I get this really weird feeling because when I went to Paris with my family a few years ago, I actually did a story time on this channel about how we were waiting outside the Paris catacombs to get a tour and my sister was almost kidnapped while we were waiting. So yeah, I just get this weird vibe whenever I think about the catacombs. We never were actually able to walk through, unfortunately, but maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's a good thing. But for those of you who didn't know, the catacombs of Paris are underground ossuaries. How do you say the word? In Paris, France, which holds the remains of more than 6 million people. 6 million people underground. It's situated about 20 meters underground, I believe. So it's just like this dark underground maze with narrow passageways. The walls are like completely skulls and bones. I mean, it's really unsettling. It's slightly disturbing to think about. And displayed on the wall, I am not gonna say this well at all. I cannot, my French? But it says, Arrête, c'est ici l'empereur de la mort. Mort? I'm sorry. But that means, halt, this is the realm of death. And this is above the entrance to the ossuary. So, I don't know, do you really want to go in there? I remember watching, I think the movie was called As Above, So Down Below. So Below. It's a horror movie about the Paris catacombs, and ever since I watched that 2 years ago, I do not want to go there. But it's a good movie. Like, if you want to be freaked out, definitely watch it. But I read a few stories about people who have gone through these catacombs on tours, and even in large groups, people still get lost and die, and it's so weird to read about. It even says some people have been admitted to insane asylums after what they've experienced down there. So, woo! Creepy stuff. I was actually surprised that on Google Maps you can actually look around down there. Like, I didn't know that was even possible. I didn't know that was a thing. But we can look. We can look in the tunnels. Ready? Are you ready? Yeah, I'm like just claustrophobic, so it's probably good that I never actually went on that tour. So the next cemetery is the Bonaventure Cemetery. I think I'm saying that right. Bonaventure maybe? But it is located in Savannah, Georgia, and it was made in 1846, so I've noticed a lot of these cemeteries started around that time. It is known as one of the most beautiful cemeteries in the world, but there is a pretty creepy ghost story behind it. So there is a girl buried there, and she is called Little Gracie Watson, and there's actually a picture of her grave, and on it says, beautiful and charming little girl. Apparently she died of pneumonia at the age of 6, which is really, really sad. My camera keeps stopping every time I talk about her. Like, that's so creepy. But it says that Gracie now haunts the striking statue carved in her honor. Many visitors leave coins and toys at Gracie's grave, and some say the little girl cries whenever someone removes them. So if you're giving her a toy or a trinket, don't take it away. Just my camera keeps stopping. Another creepy thing is that people say they've seen either tears or blood run down from the statue's eyes. So the Bonaventure officials have actually fenced off Gracie's grave to protect her from visitors, but some claim the fence is meant to contain Gracie's playful spirit. So I mean, this is kind of a sad story, but also creepy at the same time, to be honest. When it comes to like ghosts or spirits that are little children, I feel like they're so playful and they like to play jokes and, you know, trick people, and that just freaks me out. But there are also a lot of like angel statues and just statues around this entire cemetery that people have claimed they've seen move. A statue named Corinne, which I'll try and find a picture of, is said to smile at visitors that she fancies. Eerie sounds also surround the lifelike statues, such as crying baby sounds near an infant's grave or giggling children near a tomb of a child. So with that being said, let's take a look at it. I really hope this is not freaking you out too much. Honestly, it's supposed to be the most beautiful cemetery in the world, so I don't think it'll be that scary. Let's see. I mean, the statues might be. Watch to see if they move. Alright guys, so I really hope you enjoyed this video. I kind of like doing this Google Maps Street View thing on haunted locations that I can't actually go to because I'm kind of limited to what's around me. So I was thinking of doing the same thing for like haunted schools, haunted houses, haunted hotels, haunted restaurants, like haunted everything, and go on Google Street View. So if you guys think that's a good idea, please let me know. And as you can tell by the title of today's video, I'm going to be telling you a creepypasta about a website called www.findagrave.com. Let's start off with how this person discovered the site. There's a story about a girl that was messing around on her school computer one day. She was on the school's homepage procrastinating from starting any work, and on the side of the homepage it showed a list of links that led her to all the different classes that she had, but she noticed a weird link that she had never seen before. This was a link to www.findagrave.com. She felt confused and even a little bit uneasy as she looked at it because she could not for the life of her figure out why it was there. It wasn't like she was doing any ancestry projects for any of her classes. So to feed her curiosity, she decided to click on the link and it took her to this website. The website had a very simple layout. It was mostly a completely white page, but in the very center there was a search bar, and above it it said search 87 million grave records. And she felt this chill run down her spine because something did not seem right. She began to type in the names of dead people she knew, and right away their biographies and photos showed up. What she found odd was that someone had gone around and taken photos of all of their graves. Every single deceased family member that she looked up, a picture of their headstone gravestone came up on the screen. So she wondered who was taking these photos. Her class ended and she went on with the rest of the school day thinking about it. And that night when she got home, she told her mother all about it. And her mother sort of just laughed and told her how weird it was, but she just still didn't feel quite right about it. She couldn't understand someone that would go around taking photos of people's graves. She asked her mother who the person was that added the photo of her great-grandmother's tombstone, because the name of the person who took the photo was like written underneath, but her mother had no idea who that was, so she could confirm that it was strangers going around doing this. So she decided to investigate a little more and began typing in the names of famous dead people such as Kurt Cobain, and sure enough, they were all on there too. There was even this feature on the site where you can leave virtual flowers at these gravestones, which she actually thought was a pretty nice feature, but it was still very unsettling somehow. She was on her computer well into the night because she was wide awake and still so curious. So she began to type in the names of alive celebrities to see if there was anyone that's dead that had the same name as them. And then she started to type in the names of alive people that she knew in real life, such as her best friend Joanne Parker. And there was about 50 other names on graves that popped up that shared her best friend's name. So here's where things get a little creepy, and this is why you should never type your own name on this website. So as you can imagine, she ended up typing in her own name, which ended up being a very bad mistake. As soon as she did, a huge grin appeared on her face when she saw people that popped up that shared her name. She didn't know why she was so pleased by this, but she clicked on all 4 of the results. She was looking at where they were from and what years they died, and she started to grow a little scared when she realized that all the dead with her name were in the states surrounding her own. Suddenly, she noticed that the website said showing 4 of 5 results. She was trying to figure out how she had missed one because she only noticed there was 4 graves at first. So she scrolled down further to the newest entry. She clicked on it and it said her birth year, and the date she died was the next day. Even creepier was that the photo that was included of her was not her gravestone, but instead it was her sitting at her desk at her computer with someone standing behind her. And it was 11:59, just before midnight. And that is how that story ends. So obviously this site told her when she was gonna die, and it was literally a minute from when she was reading it, which is so creepy. Okay, so when I first read this creepypasta, I thought that all parts of it were totally fiction, like totally made up to scare people. So I decided to type in this website on my computer just to see what would happen. And to my surprise, it actually pulled up a page that said world's largest gravesite collection. And there was a search bar where you could search people's names who have died to pull up their tombstone. So yeah, this site is actually real, which kind of gave me a bit of a fright at first. But then I spent some time on it and read more about it, and it definitely is not in any way associated with this creepypasta at all. I just want to put that out there in case like people from that site watch this video and they're like, how dare you like associate us with something creepy. No, this person made up the creepypasta, I guess because they saw this website, but they are not connected anyway. And this website is actually quite fascinating and interesting. It's a website that allows the public to search and add to an online database of cemetery records, and it's actually owned by Ancestry.com. It receives and uploads digital photographs of headstones from burial sites taken by unpaid volunteers at cemeteries. So people are very sweetly volunteering to do this so that everyone's gravestone is online and people can search it whenever they want and find more about this person, and you can see when they died. You can even go on there and look up famous people and they will show up. Important people from history. By the way, this video is not sponsored in any way. I just don't want to end it giving this website like a bad rep in any way. So if you take anything away from this video, it's that, you know, now you've discovered a cool website. But you know me, I do love when people take something totally normal and like twist it and make a creepy story about it. That's basically what my whole entire channel is. So I really did want to make this video. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you want me to tell more creepypastas, give this video a thumbs up and let me know.